Sarah.
I
forgot that last week. So people who don't get to listen right in real time could listen later. But we'll start by asking each person to share their name and one word that comes to mind for you that describes your relationship with the Trifaith Initiative. So I'll repeat that. You'll share your name and one word that describes your relationship with the Trifaith Initiative. I'll be glad to go first because I've had a little more time to think about it than you have. And my name is Wendy Goldberg, and I'll use the word courageous.
My name is Sierra Salgado Parigi, and I'm going to use the word friendship.
My name is Ann Pickle, and the word I'll use is proud.
I'm Jeremy Fricke, and I would say potential in the future.
Hi, I'm Sharon, and how about exploring?
My name is Judy Wabel, and I'm going to use the word passionate.
My name is Roger Wabel, and I'm going to use the word interested.
Interested or interesting?
Interested.
Interested.
Thanks.
If you just joined us, we are sharing our name and one word that describes your relationship with Trifaith.
Charles Shapiro and beginning.
Sandy Christofferson, and mine is opening.
I'm Maria Azriel, and my word Middle East.
Middle East.
Middle East?
Yes. And 2 wars.
We'll let you. Special privileges for you.
Hi, my name is Eric, and I would say enlightening.
Hi, my name is Joan Shapiro, and I'm interested.
Thank you. Welcome, Karen. We are just sharing our name and one word that describes your relationship with Trifaith. Bimar, am I saying your name correctly? I think you're muted. There we go.
Yes, ma'am. Vimari.
Vimari, thank you.
I'm thinking, I still don't know.
You're good. Karen, we're calling you on the spot, but you're on the beach, so clearly you're feeling rested.
I'm working on that. Yeah. Karen and my relationship, I guess more of an observer because that's all I can do at this point.
Great. Mari.
Yes, I'm the same, like observer. I've never been here, so I don't know what to expect.
Perfect. Well, welcome. We're very glad you're here. Where are you joining us from?
I live in Dallas.
Wonderful.
I am Christian. I'm married to a Muslim, and we heard about Trifaith through internet. We are very interested, and we tried to visit before the pandemic, but then the pandemic hit on, so we couldn't go. But I still kind of joined, and I'm very interested in learning more.
Good. Well, I hope this session is helpful for that and many more.
Thank you.
All right. So the next question for us to share is, what brings you joy about the work of the Tri-Faith Initiative or interfaith work in general? So again, you can raise your hand or just unmute yourself and speak. What brings you joy?
I think with interfaith and tri-faith work, learning about different people's perspectives on the world is something that interfaith work and tri-faith have a special place to do, and that gives me a lot of joy.
Sandy.
She's muted.
Learning how to listen, and then what questions to ask, and knowing it is okay not to know, and it is safe to say that.
Thank you. Judy, did you?
Yes, I was, when I grew up, my father was a Roman Catholic and my mother was a Protestant. And it was a very, it wasn't really a cooperative effort. It was a very hostile environment. And so it gives me great joy to see people of different faiths coming together to do creative things, to keep themselves in relationship, to allow each one to have their faith and live it peacefully.
Anne.
I almost have to echo her words, although we didn't have that. I didn't have that in my upbringing, but the fact that we all can share and know that so much of it just comes from one place, and that's a good thing. And I'm sure that there's other branches of faith. There's so many Protestant churches, and of course we don't have anybody in the area, in our neighborhood, Catholic, but to know that there are so many similarities, more similarities than not. And I think this is a real good thing.
Welcome, Deborah. We are telling about things about tri-faith or interfaith work that bring us joy. And so you can take a moment when you're ready to share. We'll welcome you into the conversation. Someone else had their hand. Go ahead and, yep, go ahead.
My name is Roger.
Roger.
What brings me dissatisfaction is growth, participation, and learning. By participation, I got learning. I got learning from a number of areas. One way was the sessions we had when with Rabbi Azrael when we were still open to meet together, and they were always fruitful. They were interesting subjects, and I had the opportunity to talk to the rabbi afterwards, and it was just very warm. And the other thing is Christmas Eve at our church. I go to the UCC congregation, and Christmas Eve we had a service, and after the service there was a couple handing out candy canes. And my wife walked on by, and I'm always the game for a candy cane. So I took one and found out the person who was handing them out had a yarmulke on. And he was a person from the Jewish congregation who was there at our church on Christmas Eve to not to worship with us, but to celebrate with us. And what a wonderful feeling that is. And that's the growth I have, is that people are there to welcome me into their lives, and I'm there to welcome them into my life. That's it.
Beautiful, thank you. Karen.
I grew up in the Rusty Bible Belt, as I put it, in a fundamental Baptist church, and oh boy, what I grew up with. they'd be horrified to know that where I am now in life. But what brings me joy about Trifaith is that it exists. I learned about the idea of celebrating diversity through Star Trek. Gene Roddenberry's philosophy on it is that we can't really learn to live in peace until we learn to celebrate diversity and not just know that it's there, but really delight in it. And that stuck with me, and seeing that spark happening, it gives hope, especially when there's so much divisiveness and hate going on in the world, to know that people are seeking ways to learn how to delight in difference.
I want to just sit there for a little bit. Thank you. Yeah.
I think onto that I started at Interfaith work when I was 20, so I feel pretty young, and it's been a big part of the lens through which I've understood diversity and the complexity and nuances of identity and how we navigate the world. And that's something that's brought me a lot of joy over the years.
I think interfaith work allowed me to understand in a whole different level the one verse from the book of Genesis, the verse that tells us that we are all created in God's image. Mm-hmm. There's no better way to understand the verse but just through the work of interfaith work.
It's so simple.
Anyone else? All right, I'll ask the next question. What do you worry are our challenges in the coming days or years for Trifaith or interfaith work?
Worry.
What do you worry about? What are our challenges? And I would say problems, but you're not allowed to say that with R.A. Azrael in the room. If you didn't know that, that's a thing. You can say challenge. Right?
Correct.
I learned. What weighs heavy on you about this work? And maybe work's the wrong word, right? Bonnie Lazarus was telling me that when we talk about working in the garden, she said we shouldn't use the word work because it is her calling. Roger.
The challenges and the opportunities, to my perception right now, I've only been here a little less than a year, but are not what happens in the interfaith community, but what happens in a relationship outside. I've seen opinions in the editorials of the newspaper that discredit the Trifaith community. And what I got to realize is I need to hold up the Trifaith community and myself to a position of not superiority, but acceptance of the outside community and of the Trifaith community at the same time. And it's difficult when somebody clearly does not like who I am or know who I am, to be congenial with them. But I have to keep doing it and showing myself and the Trifaith to be something that's not confrontational, but that is just accepting. Thank you.
This time is really asking us to be personally accountable.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Why would anybody be against it?
Anybody else want to answer that?
I mean, I haven't run across it, so
I
if
can
anybody
answer
has
that.
an example. But
I think within the fundamental Baptist religion, that I can speak to, and I'd imagine that kind of fits in other ideas, is that there is only, they consider there's only one way to believe and to behave and to act. They don't even see other Christian denominations as valid. That there needs to be, everyone needs to be like them. And that diversity is some liberal, horrible thing, and it's a way to dilute who we are instead of adding to it. It's a dilution, it's a danger to accept the other as valid in the first place, much less someone you want to be friendly with. So it's diversity is a danger to them more than anything. And there's a fear. And once I realized that, it was heartbreaking because so many people who could love better and they're so afraid, and they don't need to be.
I understand what you're saying, and I guess I'm lucky that all of my friends, whether they're Protestant or in one of our faiths, of our tri-faith or Catholic, think so much like I do as far as our social opinions of things. I don't mean social like going to a party, you know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. So maybe I'm a little bit enclosed in that. I don't have any friends that would even think, they all think the tri-faith is wonderful, even if they're not participating in it. They just think it's the coolest thing. So I'm a little sheltered in that.
My challenge is with the Jewish community, not with the Christian or the Muslim community. And the challenge is that we have some traumas as a result of having a long history with lots of traumas, where we just think about ourselves. Why do we need to be involved? The whole world hates us. And therefore, maybe there's a mistake to get involved with other religions. Let's just continue circling our own wagons. And so you have a large group of Jews that really advocate to stay separate, stay unique in the separation. And those are some of the fights that I had in the last, how many years, Wendy? But those are challenges that are thrown by Jews.
Can I ask you, this is some bold question for me to ask in public here. I'll warn you. Is it possible that the same challenge that you worry about for the tribe of Judaism is also applies to a question of the tribe of Abrahamic? When we ask ourselves about tri-faith versus interfaith and how big the tent is and who we're including, I understand our priorities. I understand who our partner congregations are. I understand the immediacy of this neighborhood. But is it possible that a challenge is that we limit the tent and we send the wrong message?
I totally understand where the question is coming from. I think that we are not yet secure with a tri-faith community. I think before we open the tent a little bit larger, to a larger community, I think we need to attain what we have first. And I don't think we are there. So I would be definitely open to having a conversation that will include other religious faith communities. But at this moment, I don't think we are strong enough to have that conversation.
I just want to be real. That's a conversation. It's not a private conversation. It's a public conversation for us. Mm-hmm. What else?
Wendy, can you ask Can you ask your question again, please?
Please, what do you worry are our challenges in the coming days or years as we do tri-faith and or interfaith work?
Perhaps, I don't know if this is well articulated. Perhaps it is our challenge is that we'll become self-satisfied. And that it will be, meaning it'll be okay because we're tri-faith, that'll be the size of the tent as you kind of use the example or the metaphor. So our challenge is going to be do what we need to do, the work we need to do to become secure, as Rabbi suggested, and to be strong enough to open ourselves to whatever is next. But that means doing the work first that needs to be done, whatever it is.
I think maybe on a related line also is there are just so many things that we want to do, right? In interfaith work, tri-faith, whoever, whether it's support the environment or racial justice, religious justice, any of those things. There's so many things that we want to impact, and figuring out what the core of it all is something that I think we'll always be in conversation about.
Yeah, it's interesting to watch us navigate as a staff with the board and clergy and members of the congregation in terms of what are we being strategic about what our long-term work is and what's today's fire, and how are we responding to the storm that we're in this moment. And gosh, if someone would have told us, a year ago that we would be quarantining in the middle of a global pandemic, in the middle of a new reality for racial justice, what that raises us to expect of ourselves in the context of faith is really interesting. Yeah, so we could spend, and we will spend lots of time unpacking those things. Sandy, did you have something else to share? You're muted.
I'm sorry, I didn't want to interrupt you. I was going to add it at the end, just something I'm concerned about.
Yeah, please.
I'm going to take a second and try to articulate it. I think that one of the things to be concerned about is in the tri-faith piece is really the intersection of people who are both or all, who have married Jews, who have married Christians, Christians who have married Muslims, and that kind of dialogue around what that has, what interplay that has at this point in time. And do we really have a place for people to share those concerns of being of both places? Of both, I guess of both, of the intersection of them both. There's a whole dialogue going on out there around that I'm hearing about because my children are of interfaith marriages and what it means now and how we go forward. And is there really a place for that if we're really intersecting?
And the intersection of religious identity with the intersection of all of our other identities, right, is what our children are asking us to talk about, for sure. Right. Anyone else before we move on to the next question to add something that you're holding a heavy spot for?
Yeah, my concern is that it's very, the veneer of tolerance may not be very thick, and if there's some crisis, what will happen to the fragile relationship, and will people revert to just seeing their own tribe as compared to a community?
Are you asking that question specifically about tri-faith or about interfaith work in general?
Well, I think it would apply, but in any community where it's diverse. I mean, if you look at history in Rwanda or other places, Yugoslavia, what appeared to be interfaith communities break down under certain, realities. And so you just mentioned a lot of stressors that our society is in now. It's not that hard to imagine a couple other stressors, making things unravel. So, I mean, I'm not a pessimist necessarily, but I am a Jew who worries about these things.
I think Rabbi Azriel said it best last week when he said that we needed to start working with the youth and getting them together and getting them to bond and to dialogue and go from there. I've thought about that all week, and I just thought that was a tremendous idea.
I totally agree, but I question how we define youth, and I think young professionals, people who are in their 20s and 30s, are ready and stepping up for social good in ways that are beautiful to witness, particularly in the last couple of weeks. And their frontal cortexes are developed to a place that perhaps we can have sustained impact, as opposed to, I don't know if you all remember what it was like to have a 16 or 14-year-old in your house, or if you had those, it's there's obviously an opportunity there too, and both and, right?
But what younger than the 20 and 30s, like in high.
I mean, I think there's an opportunity in preschool to start talking about what we're all created in God's image. And certainly there's along the path of curriculum, there's lots of opportunities. I just happen to think there's an intense opportunity for leadership on the Tri-Faith Commons with young professionals. All right, so the next question, Sandra, who's joining us over there? Where you're muted, we can't hear.
He has lots of opinions about diversity and leadership and so forth. So.
But it seemed like maybe he thought he wanted to tell us a story.
Probably.
So the next question is that I had thought maybe we would break out into groups, but I think we're such a small and mighty group. Let's stay together and hear each other's stories. This next question is, could you share a story of a meaningful interfaith, and you can swap tri-faith in there, experience that you've had with an interaction and why it matters?
This is a story that I shared with the rabbi after one of our sessions. I lived outside of Boston, Massachusetts, and I sang with a barbershop group. And in that area, several people were Jewish. And one of our dedicated members died, and I went to a worship service at a local temple. I asked other Jews if that would be okay, and they said, sure, certainly it would. And then they told me about the Jewish tradition of meeting at the deceased family's home for 10 days for prayers. And I asked this one Jew, I said, do you think it would be okay with a widow if I showed up there? And he said she would be delighted. And so I showed up there at the time, about 7 o'clock at night. I knocked on the back door, and there were 6 or 8 or 10 women standing in the kitchen talking. And Barbara, the widow, said, "Oh, Roger," she said, "you can either stay here in the kitchen with us, or you can go in the living room with the men who are going to have a worship service." So I said, "I'll go in with the men." And I walked in there, and then they were so excited. They said, "Oh, good, the 10th man's here. We can start worship now." I said, "I'm a Jew." I said, "I'm not a Jew," and they said, "It doesn't matter." Wow, to be included in that kind of thing when I felt so different was a thing of absolute beauty to me.
Thank you for sharing that story.
that's my experience too. As I started to say last week, that Cantor Wendy during the open house for the New Temper Israel had asked if a friend and I wanted to start coming on Thursdays to visit and to attend all of the sessions that Rabbi Azriel and the other clergy were putting on, and just being so welcomed and made to feel really so special, and learning at the same time was just incredible, and is an incredible experience with the benefits of meeting all kinds of new friends. So I think the interaction alone is something Tri-Faith has been trying and doing a good job on, but we need to get more people involved.
Yeah.
I went to a service at the mosque, and of course I knew before I went that we would be sitting separate from the men. But it was funny the way there was just a wall we could kind of see through. But I thought it was very interesting. Well, Wendy was still there. So yeah, it was way over a year ago. And I can't remember what service it was. But I thought it was very interesting that some of the women from the mosque, knowing that we weren't used to sitting on the floor, had chairs for us. They got chairs for us. And I would have been happy to sit on the floor. And actually, some of them weren't. Everybody that belonged to the mosque, some of the women were sitting in chairs, but they made sure that we had chairs. And I thought that was very nice. I'm old, and getting up from the floor isn't as easy as it was when I was young, but I would have done it if we had to.
Where's? Please.
I'm remembering the growing up with the Roman Catholic Protestant thing being so troubling. And when I was in my, I don't know how old I was, 40s, maybe? No. Anyway, around 40. I began doing liturgical dance, and I was dancing with 3 other Protestant women. And one of them had to leave. She was going to the Middle East, I think. Anyway, she left, and we were trying to decide what we were going to do. And we came into contact with a group of women, 3 or 4 of whom were nuns, and the rest were all Roman Catholics. And I began to dance with the Credo Liturgical Dance Company. We met at a Roman Catholic church, a sanctuary in a convent. And it was an eye-opening experience for me. So many things that I had been told were bad or evil or whatever were wonderful. I have such a strong appreciation for liturgy now that I don't think I had then. And they're still in Massachusetts, and I'm in Nebraska, and we are meeting every Wednesday night for prayer, just with email. We don't have Zoom, to keep that connection. And so, you know, sometimes you learn a lot when you just dive into things. And so that's a powerful story for me.
First.
I mean, so I had the opportunity to go to the Parliament of World Religions back in 2016 when it was in Salt Lake City. And I mean, I've had so many experiences with interfaith work, but that was very important. I mean, firstly, the Latter-day Saints get a bad rap a lot of the time, but they were a major host of that event. And I think one sort of photo, if you will, that's kind of stuck in my mind is this this time where one of the Sikh communities were doing their hymns, and a a Buddhist community came and sat with them, and there was a lot of emotions involved. So, but it was very beautiful to see people who could connect on a level, even though they weren't even able to understand the language being spoken in the hymns. They could feel something that is very human.
So I'm going to just pause us for a moment. Someone is joining who I don't recognize. Eric had to leave, so he was generally watching the door. If this person comes and it creates an experience for us that is something other than what we're hoping for, we'll remove him from the room. But we're welcoming and open and hope that we can extend the tent, right? So I'm only saying this because it's not a name that I am familiar with. So we'll welcome him or her. Yes, Ari.
It was during the time that my wife was in the hospital, and the imam came and offered to do a mishabeh, a prayer for healing in Arabic. And he asked me if he should do it. And I said yes, and Elise said yes. And we experienced something unique during the minute and a half of a prayer in Arabic for my wife's healing. And it was definitely a feeling at the end when he finished the prayer that we got some extra strength. And it felt similar to how we used to feel when that prayer was recited in Hebrew. There was the same intention, the same love emerging from the words. And it definitely gave us a great strength to continue in the struggle.
Beautiful. I just want to take a moment to welcome, my phonics skills are poor. Awaz, is that how we say your name? You're muted. Well, we'll keep going. So we're sharing stories of interfaith connection. I'm going to share one that is kind of a combination of stories, but I have been very grounded in the Jewish community, particularly as an adult, and yet sometimes saw my practice of Judaism as pediatric. And a couple of years ago, I spent 2 years doing a very deep dive into yoga teacher training, which included a lot of Buddhist and Hindu teaching, and called me in that moment to connect my adult self and deepen my relationship to my Judaism through breath and spirit. And while I kind of knew that those things were happening and that I was deepening my own relationship to the faith of my childhood, I don't know that it was until I sat with Imam Jamal at the coffee shop at the church, which is interesting, and we were having a conversation about meditation. And he asked me whether or not I ever meditate on the word God, Allah. And the answer is no. That is not a word that I choose to consciously bring into my meditation, but I do use a practice of mantra often. And when I realized that the mantra that I use most often, which is about being open-hearted, and is in fact, for me, that compassionateness of God. And so if I try for his experience, which I did, in my next practice to use the mantra, to use different words for God or an understanding of the divine, and feel that intensity through the love that he shares for those words. I found the experience to be profound. And I think Barbara Taylor Brown, for me, says it really beautifully when she speaks of holy envy, and that each of our traditions in very different ways have such beautiful rituals, and that when we try on someone else's ritual, it doesn't necessarily make me Muslim, but it really does deepen my relationship to my Judaism. And so that's an experience that I kind of on an ongoing basis question myself about, how I connect to the faith of my ancestry and my childhood, and yet open myself up to experiences of other faiths. Yeah, Sandy.
Am I unmuted? I'd like to share just two really quickly, one very old and one very new. I think my connected experience had to do with many years ago when I was part of a wonderful program for music for children called Strawberry Squares when I was here I got to go with the cast for a taping of a Christmas program in a Black church, and the choir got part of what they were doing was singing the Alleluia choir, and it became an incredibly spiritual experience because praise and worship is so important in the community that I haven't experienced so much in Judaism, but I really get it when I'm in a very spontaneous and high-powered praise and worship service. And I was really struck by how I could feel that even though I wasn't going for Jesus, I was going for God. And that was very powerful for me. And I carry the idea that that's where we really intersect in that. And that was a very connected experience for me, not only with Christians, but within that Black community. Then I had another experience just recently with a person who helped from a very Christian point of perspective walk with me and my mother-in-law who was actively dying. And he walked her after we were just alone together in the room. And I was speaking to her, but at the end, he did some prayers over her and he sang. And at the end, he asked if he could pray over her. And I said, of course. And he prayed, and in his prayer, he walked her essentially to Jesus and that space. And as soon as he was finished, she died. And that was very profound for me. I know we Jews do it in other ways, but that was extremely profound for us to share that together. And we have a very close bond. He happens also to be a minister or a reverend of a Black church. So.
Thank you.
I think I've also had a lot of interfaith experiences, but something that I've been thinking about today with the Supreme Court DACA decision was in 2017. I actually went with a group of lay and faith leaders to go talk to Congress and to participate in civil disobedience around DACA, and we were arrested. And it was a wonderful experience overall, but there was this moment, at the time I identified as an atheist, and I actually had a cold, right? And so I'm like zip tied with my hands, I can't wipe my face, and I'm sitting here like in this like holding, like surrounded by like 14 clergy, and I sneeze, and all 14 clergy in unison just go, "Bless you." And it was and it was just this weird little moment that is still just like I loved so much that I'm just like sitting here just like surrounded by all these people from all these traditions and getting blessed all at once. Like it was just a cool moment.
Anne.
I have a question, and it sort of bothers me to even bring this up because it's hard. If we had Now, I understand if we have the young people that are like in their 20s and 30s and in their teens, but what if we had something with the younger children, and teens understand the differences in religions, and they understand then in the Christian religion the importance of Jesus. But what if you had children that were, say, 6, 7, and 8, and the importance of Jesus for the Christian ones, kids, they don't have filters. And what if something was said to the other children? I don't know if I'm articulating this correctly. That they don't believe in Jesus and so they're wrong. I guess is what I'm saying.
It becomes a teachable moment, I would think, because then the adults in the room would be able to kind of guide.
They would have to have
use
good,
it.
yes.
Yeah, because if you just letting it go would create tension, but if you can use that to really teach all the kids, this is, what each tradition believes and how we respond to it in an age-appropriate way, they can deal with it. My son goes to his girlfriend's church periodically, well, before COVID, obviously, and his understanding is closer to that age, 7 to 10, as is his girlfriend, and they're both 22. But anyways, they understand that there are differences, and it's just like, whatever to that, both of them, and the church handles it well. Even when Ben says, my name is Ben and I'm Jewish, because it's the one label he owns that he's been given. And just seeing that they handle it well, they teach this is what we believe, but they never give that sense that you're wrong if you don't believe it. And I think if you give that tone in that teachable moment, you can share what you believe without conferring wrongness to those who don't.
And I might have said it wrong. I might have said it harshly, and I didn't mean it that way. Mm-hmm. I just, with children, and you're right, it depends on who would be adult-wise with them.
I have a really interesting experience about that, because I think it's really important on some level that the images of Jesus on the cross are different in all kinds of different places, and children are exposed to that, and being able to have a dialogue with knowing how the community approaches those kinds of symbolisms. My experience is watching my grandchildren become exposed to that in various different ways because they looked at pictures, and watching how the dialogue in the different Christian spaces that there are deal with that. And I think that's important for Jewish kids to understand. I don't know where that education comes in, but I think that's really an important dialogue to be able to say everybody looks at it differently. And that's where it does start, I think, Anne, you're right, at a young age. And I know there's other things about it, but being able to look at all the symbolism of that's the same thing. I think when you look at the Passover kinds of symbolisms that come out and those images are there in children's heads, and how we help them sort that through is important.
If my son can calls pork, oh, that's what Christians eat, because he knows that Jews and Muslims typically don't eat it. And there are simple ways of putting things, so they will hold on to it. And then as their understanding grows with age and maturity, they can gain more information about it with time.
Judy, did you have something to add?
Yes, I heard of this. Doesn't have as much to do with faith differences, but it has to do with racial differences. But I think this situation applies. A young woman who was in the church that I served is a grown up and has 2 little girls. One is 5 years old. So the mother was trying to have a discussion with her daughter about what's going on, what's been going on in the past, I don't know, 3 weeks now, not 2 weeks, however long it's been, and talking about race. And after her discussion with her, the little girl turned to her mother and said, "Well, Mama, at least all of our hearts are red." She went to what we have, what she thinks anyway, that we have in common, rather than sticking with what we have that's different about us. 5 years old. I think children have a wonderful ability to accept things, but it has a lot to do, accept differences. It has a lot to do with how the material is presented, who the individual it is that presents it. And I think when we have these kinds of conversations, where I think it was Sandy said it earlier, where we don't have to worry about it, whether what we say is going to be taken in a hostile way or a wrong way. We can there's a level of trust in which we understand each other to be trying, that you know, it works better. It can work.
Yes.
I guess I'm just kind of hearkening back to when I was growing up, and I don't think these things are in the Catholic Church anymore, but I had a Catholic friend when I was little. I must have been 7 or 8, and the rest of us weren't Catholic. At that time, I was Protestant. I wasn't Jewish yet. And anytime we did anything, she'd tell us if it was a mortal sin or a venial sin. And it really, I found it extremely disturbing. So I had to ask my parents what that meant. They weren't really sure. They knew what a sin was, but you know, they didn't know the breakdowns of sins, but this little girl just always felt compelled to tell us, you know. And none of us, of course, had done a mortal sin, but we knew what they were. And so I don't think that happens anymore. I don't think that they have, is it venal or venial sin or some kind of a sin? I don't know if that even exists anymore. I never hear of purgatory anymore. She was into purgatory, you know, we're all going to go to purgatory for a while. Well, that was quite distressing. Because at that age, we sort of believed, you know, what our friends told us. And if we had told her something else, she would have believed us. But so anyway.
Awaz? Is that how you say your name? I think we were having a
Hello?
There you go.
What?
Like he's got a lot of connection problems.
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Am I audible?
Yes.
All right. Glad tidings of peace and prosperity from India. My name is Owais Aslam and I am from Kolkata, the land of Saint Teresa. My story is extremely interesting and it's quite different. My great-grandmother happened to be Jewish, who had escaped the persecution when Japan Allied forces had attacked Yangon at that time, Burma. And she came to Kolkata after she escaped from there. And she was working as a nurse in Kolkata at the Calcutta Medical Hospital. And at that time, it used to be called the Elias Mayer Hospital. And she was a nurse who was serving in the hospital. And at that time, she happened to meet my great-grandfather. My great-grandfather happened to be a Christian man who was a Sufi singer, a Sufi Qawwali singer. And they fell in love and they got married. And after that, my great-grandmother gave birth to 3 daughters, out of which one of them was my grandmom. They were all brought up as practicing Jews. And my grandmother,
oh dear.
It's so interesting.
Yes.
Oh,
Wait just a second here.
he's over here.
Can we try again?
Where is
India?
My grandmother, my grandmother was one of the women, one of the daughters, and she got married to a Muslim. And we were born and brought up in a very pluralistic environment where people of all faiths, namely Jews and Muslims, were living together in harmony. We used to celebrate Eid al-Fitr together. We were celebrating Hanukkah together. We were celebrating all the festivals together. And in the year 1970s, my great-grandmother took Alia along with two of her daughters to Israel. And after that, my grandmother, who got married to the Muslim, my grandfather, she visited Israel several times, and she had been working on Jewish-Muslim harmony. So I learned a lot about Jewish-Muslim relations and interreligious dialogue, and a lot of similarities while growing up I had witnessed in my life. So it comes to me extremely naturally to be a peace builder. And over the years, I have started an organization which is called the Indian Pluralism Foundation. And this organization has namely been working at the grassroots level to promote an interreligious dialogue and interfaith education amongst the children at various schools and colleges. So we have been working at the grassroots level to promote harmony, and it so happens that there is a lot of anti-Semitism and Islamophobia present in India right now. We have been witnessing a lot of hate speech of late. So we have been trying to work on that and trying to build bridges of trust, acceptance, appreciation, and acknowledgement between all the communities. So that is my story in a nutshell. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity. God bless you. Salam and shalom.
Thank you. That's a really beautiful way to bring our hour together to a close, to realize that the impact of our work is drawing people from across the globe into our Zoom session today. Thank you so much for joining us. Each of our stories is so incredibly powerful. We have had a little ritual, and I see a few people doing it, and I had an experience with it this week that I think is interesting. So if you could rub your palms together, just bear with me here. Rubbing your palms together until you start to feel the heat that comes between your palms. And then pause with your palms and put them up against your face. And the energy that is coming into your face in this moment is the beauty and love and peace that comes from us coming together. And hold that with you this week, please. Yes. Sending out to all of you as well. Peace.
That almost made me cry just from feeling good.
Good.
And I do that by myself sometimes.
Please.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for joining us.
I'm going to be thinking tomorrow at 11 o'clock.
Take care.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you. This was a wonderful session.
Yeah.